visibility of the stream to public, and we are live. Okay, it is saying that we have one concurrent viewer. Welcome to the stream, one concurrent viewer. If you have any questions about our loons, you can totally ask us in the chat and I will get the camera going. Here is the wonderful loon. Hello, Ruan Duplessis in chat. How are you today? I would like to introduce everybody to our wonderful loon biologist expert, Tamra Zeller with Fish and Wildlife Service.
Hello, everybody.
Ruan Duplessis would like to hear about how things are going with the muskrat's relationship with the loons.
From what I have gathered, and Eleanor, you may have more info, it was going well. The muskrat has not been seen for quite a while, but we don't think the loons took their grievances out. They seem to be cohabitating just fine, but it hasn't been seen near the raft for days, and probably has just moved on, or kind of got the hint that they weren't really welcome there. So that's the info I have, and I'm not sure, Eleanor, you might have been keeping track a little bit more.
No, I think that's all we have. I know we haven't seen evidence of a speared muskrat, which is pretty good. Hopefully there were no speared muskrats involved, but yeah, the muskrat is not hanging out with the loons anymore. It is known that muskrats and loons can hang out in the same place. In fact, I recently took a trip to Question Lake, where the loons nesting there also had a muskrat that lived on the island in the middle of the lake, so they do tolerate each other. It was just very odd for the muskrat to be on the raft at the same time. I just turned some of the real link noises down. We just got a plane flying overhead. Tamra, wonderful loon biologist. How long will the loons be hanging out on the raft incubating their eggs? It's not going to be a whole ton longer, right?
No, they typically incubate their eggs like between 23 to 26 days. And since they laid on their first egg on May 27, we should expect hatch pretty soon. I would say within the next week, or end of next week, maybe. So yeah, keep an eye out. And then the second egg was laid, I believe, 2 days later. So the loon will incubate until the second egg is hatched, and even then, they often incubate their chicks on the raft for a little bit as well.
Very nice. There are 2 videos on the Loon Cam channel that you can go check out later, 3 concurrent viewers, where I call for guesses on when the eggs will hatch, and we're still open. They haven't hatched yet. You've still got a chance. You might get it right. And yet again, there is a plane passing over, and Reolink is incredibly loud. And when I say Reolink, I mean the camera system that we're using to watch the loons. We had two, but the first one was not very reliable, and then it broke completely. So we've got another one coming. For now, we've just got this angle of the loons to work with. Ruan wants us to share our favorite loon facts.
Oh, wow. Favorite loon facts, I guess. I don't know if I have a favorite. I have a lot of facts. There are 5 species in Alaska. We're the only place in North America to have that honor. Yellow-billed loons, Arctic loons, Pacific loons, common loons, and red-throated loons. And Pacific and Arctic loons look very similar, but they were split into different species in 1985. And Arctics are only found in the really western reaches of northern Alaska. They're more of a Russian European bird, and there's some distinctions. So red-throated loons are the smallest. Yellow-billed loons are the largest. Red-throated loons are the only loon that can actually take off directly from the water. The others are so heavy that they have to like walk on water, like I guess a Jesus bird, or more take off like a float plane. They need a really long runway. They have solid bones because they feed on fish. They're visual predators, and so they have to be able to see their food in order to catch it. They're long-lived, 20 to 30 years old. The oldest pair known, common loons, are 32 and 33 years old. They were banded as chicks in Seney National Park in Michigan. So that's a really cool story. So yeah, they live quite a long time. They generally lay 1 to 2 eggs, depending on their body condition. And they the chicks are born so they can get right into the water, but typically they'll incubate. And common loons are the only ones that actually have chicks that go on their backs, at least to my knowledge. And that's thought to be an evolutionary trait that came from the fact that they're sharing their waters with predatory fish like pike. Let's see what else. I could go on and on. I'm not sure if I'm hitting any of the things you want to know about.
You have a lot of favorite loon facts.
I do.
That's wonderful.
I'll stop and pause if there's specific questions, but those are some of the neat things that I think about.
My favorite loon fact is how their legs are so far back on their bodies that it's very difficult for them to walk. I just love watching them try to get up and off of the nest. It is one of the most adorable things ever.
Yeah, that is,
we have another question from YouTube chat from Chandra Poe, who would like to know, when the loons leave Connors Lake, where will they go?
That is a great question. And to the best of our knowledge, loons will typically go to marine environments and spend the winters there. I suspect that the chicks from Connors might go to maybe like in Anchorage, we have a place called Westchester Lagoon, where they might spend a few more, days or whatever, but eventually they'll all end up in the marine environment. So near coast marine, so off the coast of Alaska, maybe even Kodiak, the Aleutians. It's really unknown Loons are really hard to capture and like band and or put in devices that we can track them. So we have limited information. But we know loons spend their off time, their non-breeding time in marine environments. So that's our best guess.
Very cool. And loons winter elsewhere, right?
Yeah, they can. Well, when you say elsewhere, I guess it's all subjective. They could simply be uh, wintering off the coast of Kodiak, for example. We did have a study back in the early 2000s on a couple of common loons that we were able to get satellite tracking data on. And they were abandoned on the Kenai Refuge, which is south of Anchorage, and simply spent the winter over on the coast of Kodiak. So they don't necessarily go, to California or the coast of Mexico or anything, which we all would think, yay, sounds like a good idea. They just need adequate food, and they might not go very far, even out of Alaskan waters. But we don't know for these Pacific loons. We just don't have any way to tell that.
Donna Pruitt in the chat would like to know if the eggs have hatched yet. They have not. We're still waiting. You can still get your guesses in. They should hatch a few days apart, as they were laid a few days apart. And to repeat what was said earlier, they can incubate them between 23 and 26 days. The loon is currently playing around with the vegetation on the raft and helping to form up its nest cup. Earlier it did some egg turning, which is how they keep the eggs in even temperature. It would be very interesting to see the loons switching who was on incubation duty during the stream, but we can't exactly guarantee that'll happen. I will ask a question that some people might have had. Oh, and you're welcome, Donna. It was wonderful to receive your question. How long do loons live for? And does it vary between species?
Great question. They generally will live 20 to 30 years. They're long lived. And the species question is a good one. And I don't know if we can definitively answer that because many of the common loon populations in the lower 48 have been studied extensively, and that's where most of our information on longevity comes from. They've been banded, and so, which is like a little bracelet, essentially that identifies loons as uniquely. And they're really, in Alaska, it's really tough to band loons because of we have so much sunlight and the way that the captures are done. There are some banded yellow-billed loons up in the North Slope and red-throated loons. And it's, unless you band them as a chick, you can't really say for sure how old they are, but you can say how long they've been monitored. But all data indicates 20 to 30 years old. And I think that's a safe bet across all species. I don't think it varies that much. Based on limited information. So they're long lived. They're it makes it really important for adults to survive so that they can live to replace themselves. And it also makes it really hard to tell if there are changes in a population because you have old loons living longer and then the juvenile is coming back to start nesting. And if you don't know who's who, it's hard to tell sometimes if the population is going down until the old generation passes on. So, and anyway, it's a really dynamic system.
And we've talked about how loons live somewhere else for the winter. Folk singing in the YouTube chat would like to know, do we know where this loon and maybe this pair of loons lives in the winter?
No, unfortunately, we don't. The only information we have is that the female who was banded in 2003 has been, obviously coming back since then. And so she's quite old. But we don't have any way of tracking her. And we have no idea if her mate is the same mate or if she's changed mates. They're just really tough to get that kind of information on. So maybe with advances in technology, and if there's a project that we could do that with, that'd be really neat to know. But
And we have another question in chat. Do different species of loons compete for the same habitats?
ooh, that's a great question. Yes. We have seen takeovers of territories from common loons taking over Pacific loon territories. So generally the bigger size of loon, which just it makes sense. So basically yellow-bills, Arctics and commons, and then Pacifics, and then red throats. That's sort of the size regime from large to big. They are all competing for fresh water bodies to lay their eggs and raise their chicks. And they, with the exception of red-throated loons, all loons get their food from the lake that they're on. So we have seen in South Central Alaska where available habitat for common loons is sort of it's maxed out. Like there's more loons that want quality lakes than there are quality lakes. And so they're starting to take over Pacific loon lakes if they're big enough. So there can be competition, and it can kind of get ugly. Loons are super territorial, but yeah, that's a great question. And we have seen that here in South Central.
Very cool. I have another pre-prepared question for you, Tamra.
Sure.
That is, what do loons eat? And then more specifically, what do the Connors Bog loons eat?
Great question. They are piscivorous, meaning they're fish eaters primarily. All loons prefer fish and small enough to grasp in their beak, but they can eat quite large fish. And it really depends on what's available at their lake. They'll eat stickleback, they'll eat trout, they'll eat salmon. Our Pacific loons on Connors are eating blackfish, which is a really quirky kind of fish that lives in a lot of the lakes here in Alaska. And so they're primarily focused on blackfish. And I would imagine there's stickleback in their lake. But I also have seen loons take invertebrates like dragonflies and other critters, and they'll feed their chicks that as well. But fish are really where it's at for them.
Sorry for the visual bumps, everybody. Reolink does not like being left on for this long. But we gotta look at the loon. They're beautiful. Something interesting that the loon crew has observed is that while the loon is sitting on the nest, many different bugs start to crawl all over it, and the loon does not seem bothered, but it is a very confusing sight sometimes.
We are lucky here in Alaska not to have black flies. I just wanted to comment on your comment, Eleanor. Because in the lower 48, with a lot of common loon studies, black flies are actually found to have a detrimental effect on loon productivity because they just are all over the loons and they will leave the nest more often, sort of like caribou do on the North Slope to get away from the mosquitoes. I don't know of any insect activity up here that is impacts them like the stories that come out of the lower 48 with black flies. So yeah, it's an interesting one. I know bugs bug us, so I'm glad that it's not a factor for our loons.
Very interesting. I would like to thank all of our viewers for liking the stream as well. Normally you'd have to ask your viewers to do that, but you all are on it, so thank you. And we've got another pre-made question for you, Tamra. What can people do to help protect loons and water birds in their daily lives and communities?
Oh, that's a great question. There's actually a lot people can do. It doesn't require, you know, miracles or a lot of effort. Loons can get along really well with people if we just respect their needs, such as keeping your distance, watching loons from a distance. If you're in a boat and you're in a site, back away. They'll let you know you're too close. If you're at an area where they're nesting, that isn't a legal off-leash area, keep your dogs on leash. And if you're a fisherman, an angler, one of the most important things you can do is to use alternatives to lead. Lead is highly toxic and is the #1 killer of adult loons in the lower 48 and has been shown to have population level effects. Loons are highly susceptible to lead poisoning if they take in a sinker, and one small little lead sinker will kill a loon. And they get sinkers by chasing fish that have tackle attached to them, like the fish have broken the fishing line and the loons go after the fish and then it ingests the whole thing. Or they'll go into the bottom of the lake to pick up rocks that help them digest and crush bones in their gizzard, which is part of the stomach. And they might pick up lead that way on the bottom of the lake. So definitely fishing with non-toxic tackle. And then also, if you do break your line or you see fishing line laying around, picking that up. There's a lot of sad stories about loons entangled in fishing line, and that's, for the most part, preventative. And then, support policies or organizations that keep your water clean and advocate for, habitat conservation. That's more high level stuff. But from the day to day, you can, just like other things, recycle, reduce your use of plastics, all these things that go into the oceans. Loons use both freshwater and marine environments. So anything that goes into the water will impact them. But yeah, there's really easy things that everybody can do to help loons, and it'll help other animals as well, and people. But ultimately, it helps us.
Thank you.
Sure.
As far as Anchorage goes, we know there are a lot of lakes with common loons and fewer with Pacific loons. But we know that there is also a red-throated loon hanging out somewhere.
Yeah, there seems to be. a single red-throated loon that hangs out on Lake Hood in one of the bays for the float planes. I think it's on the northern side. And year after year it shows up and never had a mate, and it's kind of it's confusing and confounding and exciting all at the same time. And I guess you can get pretty close and pretty good views of it from that. So we do have all three, and occasionally I've seen all three species, Pacifics, commons, and red throats at Westchester. As loons move through, on their way north or south, they'll, just like other birds in migration, they need a place to stop and rest and feed. And so you'll get activity that way. And also loons that have failed breeding during the summer will generally start moving around in July. So you'll get a lot more movement around that time period as well. And you can see groups of loons up to, like I've seen up to 12 loons, common loons together, like out on Red Shirt Lake in the valley. So yeah, there's an opportunity to see different species for sure here in Anchorage.
We've got We've got another question from the chat from Folk Singing. They say, loons sound like they can be pretty fierce. What sorts of animals have we observed them in conflict with or defending themselves from?
Oh, great question. Yeah, they're really interesting. Loons are highly territorial, and especially when they're, in their breeding, on their breeding lakes. And I've seen and heard stories of them defending themselves from eagles, any kind of raptor. There's a story coming from the lower 48 of a loon piercing an eagle and killing it as it came down. Bears will walk onto the nests and try to, get eggs. It's real. I've seen river otter, come into conflict with loons. Loons are pretty fierce. They'll pretty much try to take out any other water bird on their lake, grebes or ducks. So the other birds clearly or steer clear of the loons. What else? Osprey, fox. Fox are a big one, and especially on tundra habitats. But here in South Central, they have potential. So a whole slew of anything that can get to their nest and get their eggs. So that's why we were really curious about the muskrat, like what was going to happen. But muskrat, he stayed in his lane and didn't mess with the loon. But once if the loons don't have chicks or aren't defending, they can be really curious as well. So it's they're quite an interesting character if they're not they'll come up to boats, and I've even heard stories of them bringing their chicks close to canoes to keep their chicks safe from eagles. So yeah, they're fierce, but they're also vulnerable and sensitive, I guess.
Thanks for answering that question.
Sure.
I managed to get the chat onto the screen. I am taking feedback on whether or not you, the viewers, appreciate that. I can remove it. I can change its size. But I added it to the screen so you can see each other's questions. We are still accepting questions, of course. I understand that the 6 of you are here have probably already asked the ones you have. So, thank you. We've got another prepped question. And the question is, how is climate change affecting loons?
Ooh, that's another great question. That's a little harder to answer, but the habitat in the lower 48 has, the timing of melt and freeze up is changing, so it makes it less predictable, and has shown, loons may show up and their ice will be, or their lake will be iced over. And it makes it harder to predict, for them to predict when to arrive. So in the lower 48, at least, studies have shown in some of the populations, like in the Midwest, that they have declined significantly. Whether that's all the climate, it's probably not all due to climate change because of the factors with people, but it's certainly, the severe weather patterns that we're seeing with wind and these weather events. There was an incident last year where loons got iced. So basically they were flying, migrating through, and hit a really rare storm, which caused their wings to get iced, sort of like an airplane gets iced and you have to get a de-icer going. Well, they became too heavy to fly and they ended up in the farm fields in Wisconsin, and people had to rescue them. So extreme weather events are definitely have potential to negatively impact loons. Concentration, as the permafrost melts in the Arctic and in Alaska, it's releasing more lead and other heavy metals that has potential to get into the bloodstream. Loons are top level predators, so that meaning that they're feeding on fish that are feeding on microbes that are feeding on are in the water all the time, and so that bioaccumulation of all the different toxins and or metals is captured by the loon when it eats that fish. And so there are a lot of different things that I think climate change is impacting as far as habitat and health, overall health. If if loons started accruing heavy metals and other toxins, it's going to impact how their productivity in terms of ability to lay eggs. So yeah, it's a really open-ended question. It's really hard to answer, but I think just the changing weather patterns for me personally, that and the melting of the permafrost with the release of all these toxins is only going to add to the challenges they face, and especially given all the other things that our humans have sort of introduced into their environment. So it's really important. I guess my message is to do what we can. I mean, we're not, as a single person, be able to stop climate change, but we can do simple things like not use lead and pick up our line. So it's a great question, a hard one to answer, but I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for answering that intricate and very difficult question.
I probably went too long and too detailed.
We have another question from Ruan, who says, with a number of loons around Anchorage, would it be fair to say they're fairly well adapted to the built environment?
Yeah, it's interesting. I studied effects of human disturbance on loons up in the valley, and looked at that. And they can adapt pretty well to human development and disturbance if they're given their space. I mean, if they have a safe nesting spot to raise their chick, and once they get on the water, and they have adequate food, they can do really well in developed environments. I mean, I think the story of this particular nest, the Connors Lake nest, is a tribute to that. It was built because the folks, Gene Tam and Scott Christie, who lived nearby, saw like a dog park that was developing, and there weren't a lot of adequate sites for nesting, so they put out this nesting raft, which allowed the loons a safe place to lay their eggs, and it's been super successful since 2003. And it just goes to show you that it can happen in a really urban environment. they have the airport, like planes flying over, they have the dogs. But they successfully fledge chicks almost every year. And so they are adaptable to some degree, as long as you just respect their space, give them a safe place to nest, and yeah, and then hope they don't come across any fishing line or lead. But yeah, I think that's the neat part about loons is we can live with them and they can live with us if we just are good neighbors.
Thank you. The camera appears to have crashed again, so let me get that back up and running. There we are. I'm still not sure what to do about putting the YouTube chat up there, and I would welcome any feedback that you have. This is the first live stream I have ever done.
Me too. So yeah, for folks that are out there, we would love to hear what we can do to improve.
Yeah.
Or what you liked, what you didn't like.
For now, I'll just keep moving you around. And then we'll see what it looks like. There is another pre-made question about how is the nest island built, but the person who built the nest island for us is currently not here yet.
I could take a stab
Okay.
at that.
How about you take a stab?
All right. So originally, the original nest island that Jean and Scott created with the help of Jeff Fair, who's a loon biologist from back east who moved to Alaska, was this giant cedar log platform. So the cedar logs, basically a big square with something in the middle, and then carved out a little space for the loon to like push itself up, and then had a canopy over it to prevent aerial predators from coming down on the nest and whatnot. So when unfortunately when Jean Scott passed away and then left funds for the project to continue, we weren't able to we used their raft once, and it just it was old and heavy, and so we rebuilt it. And currently the raft is made out of PVC piping with some foam, and some Trex decking in the middle. And I can't remember exactly the size of it, but I think you can get a good idea based on the video. And then we revamped the canopy so that it provides loons both protection from predators and a little bit of safety. They like to be able to see, but they also like to remain a little bit hidden and a place to mount the cameras. So that's sort of the nuts and bolts of it. And then it's anchored by 2 cinder blocks that have been sunk into the lake with some wire attached to buoys, and those are attached to the raft. So when we retrieve it each fall, those stay in the water, and we just remove the raft and the canopy. So this year's raft is version 4, I think. I think we've tried different things and had some success. I mean, luckily the loons aren't super picky and they have nested every year since we've been replacing the raft, but we're always trying to improve their situation. They come out, it's launched, and they're almost there immediately. So we're doing something right, I think.
Yes, regarding the launching of the raft, there's actually been, every time we've done it, the loons have watched us paddle out to where we launch it, we've got a changing of the guard that I missed. The eggs are now on full view.
Oh,
Yeah, we've got wonderful little loon eggs for display. I'll continue my raft launching story though. Every time we do it, the loons will watch us and be like, oh no, are they going to bring the raft out? And then we bring the raft out, and then they have to pretend that they're a little bit wary of us, and then they come join it. And whenever we have to do maintenance on the raft and we paddle out there, we have to fix the canopy, fix the netting, add some extra flotation. The loons will leave, watch us, and come straight back. So they are very used to their raft. They know exactly what's going on.
yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. It's like clockwork. And I wish the meal was banded so we know if it's the same mate, but um yeah, they're just super site faithful and waiting for we joke around, call it their balloon condo, but yeah, it's definitely their home, and it's neat to see.
I would imagine that most people have not had the fortune to be able to look at loon eggs. So this is a very cool opportunity. I posted a short on the channel a while ago that has them close up and in two different lightings if that is of interest to anyone. Coming back to the fact that the loons just know the raft and continue to nest here, one of our pre-made questions for Tamra, why would the loons keep nesting here? Why do they keep nesting in the dog park?
Yeah, it comes back to a few things. Loons in general are extremely site faithful. Once they establish a territory and are successful, they somehow know, this is the biggest mystery of all, like they somehow know their lake and come back every year, and they don't necessarily come back with their mate. So one will show up ahead of the other, and they just, I don't know, they know where it's at. So that's part of it. And then in order to keep coming back, there needs to be some value to it. And so this appears to be a very valuable territory for them. They've been able to successfully breed on there for years. And so if they weren't successful, they probably would abandon and give up. But because they have that platform where they can safely nest, and they're able to raise chicks, it's like positive reinforcement. So they keep coming back. And yeah, so that's important, from our standpoint, is we need to keep getting the raft out there. And whether or not they would abandon and or try to nest along the shoreline, I'm not sure. They didn't in the one year we weren't able to do it during COVID 2020. I didn't see any evidence of nesting, not to say that they didn't try. But yeah, so it's just providing them what they need. And like I said, that's a safe place to nest, not disturbed. They don't mind the airplanes or the dogs don't bother them. So they keep coming back.
And we're pretty glad they do, because then we get to watch them every year.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's a really neat experience. Just just to see up close what they're doing, and also from being part of the crew, like just you become emotionally invested, personally invested in their outcome. And I just think it's a neat story to show how loons or or loons, but wildlife in general can coexist in urban environments. And we have a lot of, especially in Anchorage, a lot of urban wildlife that we're really lucky to have. And that we, you know, take care of that. And we learn, you know, to appreciate what we have in our backyard so that we can appreciate things that we might not have access to. I'm lucky to see loons in other parts of the state. But I know for most people, this might be their only experience. And so this project is really neat. And I'm so glad the loons are into it as well.
Yeah, we're very lucky to have these loons. We have about 15 minutes left of the stream. If anyone watching would like to share this with your friends for the last 15 minutes and see if they have questions, please feel free. If you still have questions, feel free to ask them. And in these last 15 minutes, Tamara, the loon biologist, how likely do you think it is that a loon will come back and start incubating again?
Ooh. You know, I honestly don't know. I'm sure somebody has studied exchange rates, meaning like when one of the parents leaves, the other one will come back. I generally seem to recall that it's, you know, between an hour or 2 hours. The other one is off feeding and getting what it needs, but I don't, you know, I don't know the answer straight off the top of my head. I should look that up, but not sure.
No,
I don't
I
think
totally pulled the rug out from underneath you with that one.
No, it's okay. It's a great question. But they don't normally leave their eggs unattended for very long. So I would suspect within 15 minutes to a half hour that one of the parents would show up. They don't want to let eggs to cool. But also it leaves them vulnerable to predators. So
yeah. My favorite part about when the loons switch duty is watching them come back onto the raft. They look so silly, but then you remember that they are so strong. And it is very cool to know that we have an animal like that right here. I understand that most people here are not well versed in the wonders of YouTube. But I would like to point out that we have now 8 viewers and 7 likes, which is almost a 100% of the people who watched it liked it, which doesn't happen. So that's very cool. Great job, everybody. Folk singing in the chat would like to know. They're trying to guess how much longer this particular loon has to live, and they were guessing 6 to 9 years, perhaps.
All we know is that the female was banded in 2003, but we don't know at what age she was banded, so it makes it really hard. But yeah, if she was banded young in 2003, and that means she's at least 20. So she's getting up there. So 20 is minimum, because I don't think she was banded as a chick. Well, I know she wasn't banded as a chick. She was an adult, so she had at least 21 years. But yeah, I think, oh yeah, it's kind of holding our breaths each year.
Yeah.
Comes back.
And no matter what happens, this loon has done an amazing job raising and bringing so many more Pacific loons into the world.
Great.
We've got another question from Liana Hefner. Hi, Liana. In the chat. Is the focus on having a loon island supported by ACF based on any conservation concerns for loons in general? That was a lot of big words, so I'm going to try to paraphrase and say, how is the Loon Island helping with conservation concerns for loons, and what are some conservation concerns for loons?
Thanks, Leanne. I appreciate the question. I understand what you're asking. It's sort of evolved. Basically,
Oh, wait, Tamara, I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but we've got a loon coming up on the raft.
Oh, yay!
This is a great moment to watch. You've got this, Loon. You can climb up the ramp. They are portioned so awkwardly, but look at that. One hop and it's on the nest island. Let's go. Great job, Loon. Now we've got some egg turning happening. And then we'll settle down and start keeping them warm.
Oh, like we planned it. Oh, that's exciting.
Wonderful. Yes, back to the loon conservation and how ACF and the Loon Raft are helping with it, please.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. Well, it evolved out of, as you likely know, the funds that were left to ACF to continue loon conservation in Alaska, and specifically a part of it is to maintain this raft. And so they started. I was Erin Poe, who works for ACF, reached out to me to ask, what are some of the concerns for loons in Alaska? And I think this project, let me back up. So of all the loon species in Alaska, there's been a lot of conservation interest in yellow-billed loons, and because they're the rarest, and they live in the middle of where a lot of oil and gas development is happening on the North Slope. And then red-throated loons have declined by 20% in the North Slope, but that's the North Slope. So how does that trickle down into South Central Alaska? The loons in South Central Alaska don't seem to be, or they seem to be fine from a population standpoint. It's really hard to assess because the areas like Alaska is so big, but from South Central perspective, they seem to be holding their own. The use of the raft to promote loon conservation is really an outreach effort. I think it's really cool. People can get up close and personal and really, care about a loon pair and learn about what the needs the loons are. And then, so when we talk of more abstract places like the North Slope, where people might not have access to, or obviously many people don't see that up close. And then loon populations in general, they have this connection with these pair of loons here in Anchorage in their backyard. And I think that's the power of this loon raft. It helps create a bigger understanding of loon needs, but also a platform for those of us that are interested in loon conservation to reach out and talk about those things. So that's how I see it working together. Yeah, I don't know if I answered the question of what you're looking for, but that's how I, in my mind, have thought about it. So it connects the urban audience with loons, which hopefully connects them with the bigger conservation effort of loons in Alaska.
Thank you for all of your input today, Tamara.
Yeah.
We've got about 5 minutes left. If anybody has any more questions or really anything to share, go ahead. We can hear some dogs barking in the background of the loons right now because they are, in fact, living at a dog park. Oh, Liana says that was a great answer.
Uh, Thanks, Liana.
As for
I,
when the.
I
Oh,
got,
sorry.
I, sorry, Eleanor, need to step on you.
I was gonna say,
Um,
as for when the next video comes out, that should be in about 6 days. And if they're early, we might have an egg hatch by then.
I was going to ask the question back to the audience, what they value, what they get out of the videos and the YouTube channel. And, from our perspective as doing this project, it would be really great to get feedback. What do you want more live stream? Do you want, what things draw you to the program?
Yes, feedback is a wonderful tool. This is our first live stream ever. Chandra says, "Good job, live streamer." Thank you very much. We just witnessed some egg turning as well, so that's pretty cool. Yes, we could probably do more live streams. The challenge with these is the battery on the camera. Today is a cloudy day, so it is not able to charge while it's on, which means it needed to have full charge before we could do this. But we could easily have more live streams. And I would keep making videos regardless, because I understand that is a format that is way easier to access for a lot of people. I can't tell if this is the same loon that was incubating before because I cannot see its legs. The female has a bright red band, so that's how you tell them apart. Got some more planes flying over. Love
I
some
guess I'll put
urban
a,
loons.
oh, sorry, Eleanor. Before we wrap up, I just wanted to put a plug in for lovealoon.org, which is our website where we have a lot of this information. The campaign, the outreach messages around, getting let out of the environment and picking up your line, but also access to the YouTube channel and the story behind the nest raft. And we're continuing to add material. So there's a lot of great partners involved for TLC, Waterways Council, J-Bear, State Parks has just come on board. So we're trying to get recycling bins for fishing line across the state. So yeah, there's a lot of encourage folks to visit that website. I'll put it in the chat.
I put a link to the Love a Loon website in the chat already.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Oh, somehow I can't see that. Okay, well, perfect.
There is another article linked in the chat about loons by Bird TLC, who is one of the Loon Cam's partners. So that's another thing you can check out. And we will go all the way till 1. We won't deprive you of your live loon time.